Okay, so welcome to lesson 6. This is beyond the basics and lens corrections. It's a kind of a continuation from last week. You'll see some of the same photos that we had last week. So the very first one is retouching portraits in Camera Raw. So go ahead and download the images and then extract them and then open them up in Bridge. So it should look like this. This is the number of photos you have. So Camera Raw is very convenient because you can retouch most portraits without even opening Photoshop. By using the spot removal tool along with the masking tool, you can still do a lot of retouching right in Camera Raw where it's non-destructive to the image. So step 1, we're going to just open the photo 1_retouching. It's a JPEG, so we're going to have to right click on it and open it in Camera Raw. And this photograph we used in last week's lesson, I believe. But in this portrait we want to do 3 retouches. First, we want to retouch any blemishes in the skin. There's a couple little small wrinkles. Granted, they're very small. I wish I had that few wrinkles on my face. Second, we want to lighten the whites of her eyes. So right here and here, the white isn't as bright as, say, here and here. This needs to be brightened as well. So we're going to lighten that area. And then third, we're going to sharpen her eyebrows, her eyelashes, her eyes, and maybe a little bit of her hair and maybe her teeth and lips down here. So the first thing we're going to do is remove the wrinkles at the edge of her mouth and a couple of the blemishes on the bridge of her nose between her eyebrows, and one is on the near her right eye. To do this, we're going to use a spot removal tool, which is the B key, or it's up here, right here. So we just click on that, and then you can move. Again, you can change the size of your cursor by using the bracket keys next to the P key. And I'm going to zoom in so I can see. So there's a little blemish here. We'll just fix that. And then there's a blemish here. Fix that. Blemish here. A little bit here. So after fixing all those spots, you'll notice again the pins are all over the place. And you can move the pin. If you click on a pin, say you click on this one, you can move and select it to tone from a different area, just like I stated before. So then zoom back out. And now she looks like she has chickenpox. Next, we'll soften the skin, and we're going to use the mask tool. Now, before, it used to be called the adjustment brush tool, which was the K key. If you press the K key, it'll automatically select the mask tool and then select the brush tool to make the mask. But I want to actually click on the masking tool here. And then you can here see the brush. By making the mask, you can use the brush, you can use a linear gradient, a radial gradient, a color range, luminance, and things like that. Or you can select the subject, which would just select the subject here. Or you could select the sky, which would select the sky. Now, I'm just going to use the brush key, because the K key, which is the brush, because I feel like it's a lot easier in this case. So then you'll get this little box here, and you can select the different sizes. Now, if these are all adjusted in different, like if they're all adjusted all over the place, it's okay. All you have to do is just click this reset adjustments, and it sets everything back to 0. But I believe they, by default, they center it all, so you don't have to do that anymore. So I'm going to make the brush size a little bit bigger. And I'll make it probably about 8. And then I'm going to just go ahead and start brushing. And by default, because the show overlay is being shown, it's going to show everything as red. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go in and I'm going to go ahead and highlight it. Now I'm going to make the brush a little smaller and get her chin. And notice that I'm avoiding certain areas, like I'm avoiding the eyes and I'm avoiding the eyebrows. I just want to retouch her skin. I could even do down here if I wanted, but I'm not going to. Okay, once that's done, I'm going to uncheck the show overlay. And you'll see that the brush is green here. This just If it's not green and if it's gray, that means that your selection is not selected. You want to make sure that it's blue. It will be by default, but if you're ever working on something, that's how you select between the two. Then I'm going to simply go to the clarity here, and I'm going to knock the clarity down to 100 and the sharpness up to 25. And I think that's a little extreme, but you can definitely see how clarity really will mask a lot of the imperfections. So what clarity does is it adds contrast to the middle range. So what contrast is the definition between the darks and whites. So by eliminating that, you're eliminating shadows. It smooths out the skin. So I think that's too much. So I'm going to go back to about -60. And I think that looks really quite good. Now again, if I want to see the difference, I can see before and after. So before, you can see some of the different imperfections where her skin smooths out a little bit. If I want to go a little more greater, I can definitely show that here by sliding it. You can definitely see the difference. But again, I'm just going to go back to the -60. So the eyes are the next thing. We're going to click on the little plus button up here, and we're going to create a new mask. And we're going to select the brush. So when you click on it, this menu will pop up, and go ahead and select the brush. And I'm going to just, I'm going to make the brush quite a bit smaller. We'll zoom in. And I'm going to make sure that auto mask is selected. And I'm going to try to just get the whites. So then I'm going to turn off the show overlay. And I'm going to drag the whites to +20, 25, somewhere around there. So I feel like the white slider did pretty well, but I'm also going to bump up the exposure to 0.50. So next we're going to do is we're going to create a new mask. I'll select the brush. And now I'm going to do the iris of her eyes. So I'm going to turn off the auto mask on this, and I'm going to be real careful when I paint this. So I'm going to just try to do just around the circle of her eyes. And the same over here. Then I'm going to turn off the overlay. And I'm going to add some contrast. So I'll add about 75 to the contrast. I'm going to add 0.85 to the exposure. And then I'm going to add about +18, right around 20 by 18 to clarity. So looking at this, I'm going to pull back. Her eyes are really bright. I think I might back off on the exposure just a hair and bring it back down to about maybe 0.50. That looks a little bit better. Okay, so the next thing we're going to do is we're going to create a new mask and make it a brush. And now we're going to actually do some sharpening. So I want to get her face fully in the screen. And I'm going to now make my brush a little bit bigger. And I'm going to now paint over her eyes. And now I'm going to make this a little bit smaller. I'm going to paint over her eye eyebrows right here. And over her lips. And maybe a touch over her hair right here. What I'm doing here is I'm making a mask on what I want to be a little bit sharper. So I'm adding a little bit of sharpness to this. So once that's done, I'm going to deselect the overlay. I'll go down to sharpen, and let's go all the way over just to see the difference. See how our eyes get sharpened and less sharpened? I'm going to add probably plus 30 to it. Then I'm going to scroll out. So now, if you hit the Q key, you can see the before and after. If I click off of this, the brush will go away. So here's before, and the face is a little bit more harsh. And here I've brightened the eyes, I've brightened the eyelash, the color of her eyes. I've sharpened her lips, eyes, and eyebrows, and sharpened this little bit of hair right here. So it's a subtle thing, but it's really a nice touch, especially if you're doing like senior portraits and stuff. You're softening that skin and getting rid of some of those imperfections. So go ahead and look at the image, admire it, and then we're going to save it. And when we save it, we're going to save it as lesson underscore or underscore 6 underscore A. And I'm going to put this right in my lesson 6 folder so I know where it is. And I'm going to go ahead and save it. So let's go back to Bridge. And the next thing we're going to do is using the graduated filter to fix a boring sky. The graduated filter lets you recreate a traditional gradual darkness or density change in the sky. It's very popular with landscape photographers. So we're going to go ahead and open 2 underscore fixed sky. And again, it's a JPEG, so we're going to right click and open in Camera Raw. And here you have a photo. And that photo has kind of a boring sky. It's an interesting color. It's really, really like bluish green. You know, there's a lot of blues and greens, but there's not a lot of yellow or warmth to this photo. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to use the filter on it. And if you hit the G key, it'll automatically open up the mask and select a linear gradual, the selection. Now, let me go back. If you open masking, you can also select the linear gradient right here as the G key. We just bypass that by hitting G from the other menu. So I'm going to press and hold the Shift key at the top of the image, and then I'm going to slowly drag. By holding the Shift key down, what it does is it keeps it at angles. Like I want it to be exactly perpendicular, and then I'm going to just slowly drag it until I reach the top of the hill. So I'm going to uncheck the Show Overlay, and I'm going to set the exposure to -2.6. And you can see how it makes this nice dark gradual density change. Now, if you want to change things, you can move it around however you want. You can also turn it if you like. Again, by holding that Shift key down, it makes it exactly different degrees. In this case, that's a 90-degree angle. So the red pin is where it starts, and this pin is where it ends. And if you want to delete it, you just simply hit the delete key and start again. And again, I'm just going to drag from the top. There. In this case, I went into the hill a little bit, but it's okay because it's such a large gradient here of a gradual change that it doesn't bother me at all. So let's make the sky a little bit more blue. We're going to adjust the temperature. So we'll add -40 to the temperature and +30 to the saturation. What that does is it adds a lot more blue. So now, unfortunately, this looks really blue too. So let's fix that. So again, we'll create a new mask. And we're going to use a brush this time. And let's make the brush bigger. I'm gonna keep auto mask off, and I'm just gonna slowly paint this. Look at it, I went over. So if I hold the Alt key, I can go negative. I can erase it. Alt key on the PC, Option key on the Mac, and erase it. So once that's close, then I'm going to go here and select Auto Mask. And again, remember, all you have to do is make sure that you don't go over the solid line of the circle. It'll automatically mask in the feathering area. Okay. I'm going to add, I'll turn off the overlay, and I'm going to add probably plus just a touch, maybe +20 to the exposure. And the temperature, I'm going to add +25. So that looks a little bit better, a little bit more yellow there. And once that's done, I'm just going to go out of here so we can see it. And let's look at it before and after. Here's before and here's after. Looks a lot better, especially the yellow and here and that gradient. So go ahead and look at the image, admire it, and then go ahead and close it, because we're not going to save this one. So the next lesson we're going to do is called Fixing Color Problems by Painting in White Balance Adjustments. So go ahead and right-click on 3_fixcolor.jpg. And again, because it's a JPEG, we're going to right-click and open it in Camera Raw. And here we have a nice image of a lady in a lavender field. So you'll notice when you're looking at this photo, the overall look of the photo is very purple, including the subject of the image. The subject's white balance looks just off. But if I adjust the white balance on the subject, the lavender loses its color and loses its impact. So this technique can work really well if your white balance is off or your color is off in one portion of the photograph. So we're going to select the masking tool, and we're going to select the brush again. So you can go ahead and paint in here. It's really sometimes difficult to see. The show overlay by default is always selected, but you can also do things like this, is just knock the exposure down. So when you're actually painting, you can actually see what you're painting. I'm going to do that. So I'm going to knock the exposure way down so that I can paint it. And I'm going to carefully paint the subject here. So I'm not going to go really close to the edge, I'm going to get the overall, and then I'm going to make the brush smaller and paint the details. So I'm going to go ahead and just paint all over real close. And if you go over, it's okay. I'm going to just undo. Now, if I want, on these plain areas here, if I want to use the auto mask, it would work really well. Because her skin is so the same all over, where this, it's got a lot of different variable values, so it may not work as well because you're talking a lot of different variations. So if it's really like real plain like here, the white is so similar that it would be easy to select that. You can use the auto mask. So if I'm sloppy, then I hit the Alt key on the PC or Option key on the Mac, and then it'll turn into a minus. Or you can select this, the minus over here, and then just adjust your brush. Go add back to the plus, and then I'll just check auto mask. I'm going to fix the edge of her arm here. Now, because this is a white balance change, it's not as imperative that you get exact, perfect masking techniques on this, because you're just changing the color. It's not like you're changing the exposure a ton. When you start changing exposure and values like that, then you'll definitely see a difference. So once you get that, it looks fairly good here. There. And again, because I'm using exposure, if I were to double click this back to 0, I believe the show overlay automatically pops up. So the next thing we're going to do is we're going to change the temperature to plus 35. And what that does is it's going to add a little bit of yellow. There, it's a little bit better there. I'm going to add plus 7 to the tint. And then I'm going to add plus 0.4 to the exposure. And I'm going to add negative 57 to the highlights. So that adds just a touch of contrast. And you could add contrast if you wanted, wanted it to look like a little bit tougher, and add 20 points of contrast. So then if you then get out of the image, here I'll show you the before and after. Again, before, very faded color, almost too purplish. Here, adding that yellow little and giving a little bit more definition to the shadows, and adding a little bit of contrast definitely gives a little bit more, just a nicer, warmer feeling to it. So I like that a lot better. So then go ahead and look at the image, admire it, and then close it, because we're not going to turn this one in either. So the next step we're going to do is reducing noise overall and reducing grain in shadow areas. So when you shoot at high ISO like 3200 or even 6400, and especially at 12,800 ISO, you get a lot of noise, especially in the darker areas of your image. And there's 2 examples of adjusting noise in these photos, and we're going to work on those. So go ahead and open for_reduce_noise1.dng, and that's then if you open it, you'll notice that it's the Welcome Center here at the college. Again, looking at RAW, there gives you some key factors. You'll see that I shot this at ISO 6400, a 14 to 24 millimeter lens at 24 millimeters at f8 at 1/25th of a second. So the whole photograph needs noise reduction. The darker areas and the shadows need even more. So first I'll tone the overall image. I'll set the white and black points by shift double clicking on their sliders. So I'm going to go to here. I'll go back to the basic and I'm going to hit shift, double click on the whites and shift double click on the blacks. And the black didn't move too much, it's just -3, while the whites went to -79. So then I'm going to add a bit to the exposure because now this is way dark. So I'm going to add 0.9 to the exposure, and I'm going to put -30 in the highlights. What that does is it just turns the highlights down just a little bit so they're not so bright. And I'm going to add +10 in vibrance and +10 in saturation. So looking at this is before and after. So already looking a little bit better. Again, there is definitely some grain in here. So we'll work on that. So next we're going to open the masking tool. And we're going to select a brush. And looking at the image in the dark back wall, there's a lot of yellow in that. And it needs to be brightened. So I'm going to actually set my settings beforehand. So I'm going to put a temperature of -25. A contrast of +12. Shadows +100. And noise reduction all the way down here at +100. I'm going to set my brush size here. Go back all the way back up. And I'm going to set my brush at 10. And I'm going to paint the whole black back wall here. And you can see as I'm painting it, it's definitely changing the color. So once that's done, that looks a lot better. So then let's go back to the edit panel and go down to detail. And we're going to remove some of the noise reduction for the whole photograph now. So we're going to set the noise reduction at 60. And then set the color noise reduction at +50. What the color noise reduction does is it removes a lot of the little tiny artifacting where you see specific actual color pixels. Noise reduction blends them together to look a lot nicer. So this will remove noise from the whole photograph where the mask only removed noise reduction from the areas that we painted with a brush. So the overall adjustment and the masking build on one another, allowing the dark areas to get extra noise reduction. So the final step is we'll crop the top of the photograph so we don't see the ceiling. So we'll just go to the crop tool and go ahead and just remove the top of it. So this is set to constrain. So actually I'm going to hit custom and widen it so that it's still the top. So it's right to the edge of the ceiling here, and I'm simply just double click in the middle. So look at the image, admire it, and then we're going to go ahead and save it. So we'll hit the save button and we'll save this as lesson_6_B. And it's a JPEG. We'll go ahead and save it right in the same folder. So the other noise reduction one is this 4_noise reduce noise 2.dng. So we'll right click and open that in Camera Raw as well. And here you can definitely see, especially when I zoom in, you can definitely see, especially the color noise in there. And that's where you see all the little tiny pixels. This was shot at 12,800 ISO. And you can see that up here. Again, I shot it with a 17 millimeter lens at f6.3 at 1,000ths of a second. So I'm going to go back out to here. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to shift, double click on whites, and shift, double click on blacks. And you'll notice that some of the detail pops back into the sky. And you can bring it even more detail into the sky by holding and dragging the highlights to -50. So you definitely see some more detail in the sky here. So again, before and after, you're starting to see a little bit more detail. So the next step we'll do is we'll open up the mask tool and we'll select the brush. And I'm actually going to set the settings again. So I'm going to add +4 to the exposure, or +0.4. +55 to shadows. Down here, noise reduction, we'll add 100%. And I'm going to carefully brush this whole area. Now, make sure auto mask is off because I'm doing a huge area. I'm going to go over here and try to get this. And here and get this. Now I'm going to make this a little bit smaller. And I'm going to go in and get this baseboard here. Now what I'm trying to not get is the outside. I just want to affect the noise on the inside of the building because that's the darker area. So that looks a little bit better. It's a little bit brighter, but again, if you look closely, there's still some definite noise in there. I cleaned up some of it, but there's definite noise. Let's go back to the edit panel, into detail. And I'll set our noise reduction at +50. And our color noise reduction to +60. And you'll see that a lot of the noise is eliminated. So if you look at it before and after. Now, one thing you will notice that a lot of the actual detail in the tile is gone as well, but that's just a byproduct of a lot of this toning. So again, looks better, but you do lose some detail. In fact, you don't even see the outlet right here. It's pretty much gone. So the noise reduction eliminates a lot of the noise, but by increasing the color noise reduction slider, you desaturate the color in the noise that's left in the picture itself. So the last thing we're going to do is go back to the basic edit panel, and we're going to add 10 points of saturation and 10 points of vibrance, because what we did is we removed a lot of color. And now I think the photo looks a lot better. So you can zoom in and see some of the details. So it looks quite a bit better. So go ahead and look at the image, admire it, and we're going to save this one as well. Again, lesson_6_C. And save it back in the same folder. So the next thing is fixing lens problems. Camera Raw plugin can automatically apply corrections for many lens problems. What do I mean by lens problems? I mean barrel distortion, converging and diverging lines, vignetting, and many other issues that you can have. The Camera Raw plugin can read the embedded camera data automatically and fix many of these issues. So if you're not happy with these automatic fixes, Camera Raw plugin will allow you to manually fix these issues. So we're going to go ahead and open autofix1.dng, and I'm going to right click and open it in Camera Raw. So again, this image is from the SE4 Welcome Center. You can see that there's obvious distortion in the window because the window supports aren't bowed like that in real life. So we're going to go to the edit panel and we're going to select optics. Once we're in there, you can click on this little arrow and it brings up a bigger menu. And you'll notice that Camera Raw has a lot of the similar properties as Photoshop does in the lens correction filter, if you've ever been in there. Photoshop's filter does many of the same things that Camera Raw can do, but Camera Raw does it faster, better, and again, it's non-destructive, so it doesn't actually manipulate the pixels. So we're going to click on Use Camera Profiles, and it'll automatically select the make of the camera, the model of the lens, and select a profile for the image. So if you look at it, before, after, it selects and corrects the barrel distortion. So look at this image, admire it, and then go ahead and close it. So then we're going to go to autofix2.jpg, right click on it, open in Camera Raw. So what happens when the photo doesn't have a profile connected to it? Sometimes the EXIF information has been stripped out of the photo. Simply click on the optics menu again. If it's not open, click on it. If you know the brand of camera that you shot with, you could select it here. And select the lens that you did. And it may or may not fix the photo. So if you don't know the brand or the lens or anything, or it's not working correctly, you can simply click on the manual tab. And this gives you two sliders, one for distortion and one for vignetting. So I'm going to add about plus 15 or so to the distortion and look at it. And you notice when you click on it, the grid pops up. So it helps you kind of figure out how it should be lined up. So I'm going to go to plus 15. And then vignetting is that darkening of the edges. And you can see that here and here. It's very dark on the edging. So you can add, by adding to it, it'll lighten the sides. And I'm going to go plus 100% or 100 to the vignetting. So then it looks a lot better and there's a nice even tone to it. So you'll notice that after you fix the distortion, the top and the bottom and the sides of the photos are now bowed and you're missing the photo. So you can easily fix this by opening the geometry panel. And there are a number of automatic corrections you can click on to see how it will look better. So this one is automatic. This one applies to the level. This one applies vertically. And this one applies level, horizontal, vertical perspective correction problems. And if you don't want to use any of those, you just go back to manually, and then you can fix it here. And you can experiment with these as you please. But I'm going to select about -8 to the vertical. I'm going to rotate it just a touch. -0.2. I'm going to scale it at 110%. Actually, 100. I'm going to scale it to 109, and I'm going to offset it at plus 1.9. So once that's done, I'm going to go back to the basic, and I'm going to shift double click on whites, shift double click on blacks, and then I'm going to adjust my exposure just a touch, bring my highlights back down. Once I get it looking good, I'm going to go ahead and look at the image, admire it, and then I'm just going to simply close it. So the next thing we're going to do is using manual geometric tools to fix lens problems. So this is one of the best features that Adobe has added, the Camera Raw plugin. It keeps getting better as they roll out more and more updates. Essentially, the upright tool takes the automatic lens correction and then adds more features and more customization. So we're going to first open the manual geometry 1.dng, and that's the one with the columns. And here's an image taken with a very wide angle lens. You can see the problem of the interior of the building. The columns tend to be leaning back. They look larger on the bottom and narrower at the top. It's a very easy fix. You can just open the optics panel. Click on the profile, and you can select the use profile corrections. It'll automatically set everything, and you'll notice there's not a lot of change in the photograph. So then we're going to scroll down and select the geometry one, the panel. Now, the very top is the upright tool. And if you didn't apply the profiles first, there'll be a little warning telling you that you should do that first. 90% of the time when you click on the A, which is the automatic, it'll fix it, giving you the most natural looking balanced correction. The other 10% of the time, level will work, which is this one here. Level is simply an auto straightening correction tool. When you click on the upright tool, the computer takes several seconds to change, so you have to be a little bit patient. So if you click on it, give it a second there. But level doesn't work for me this time, so I'm going to select the auto. There are several other upright tools you may want to experience. If you get your image close, you can open the manual transformations below in the panel and then manually adjust the image. In this case, I'm going to add plus 18 to the vertical slider. And -5 to the horizontal slider. And as you adjust these manual sliders, you'll see the grid pop over that. It's designed to help you straighten it. We're going to crop this image. And notice that the edges here are missing. But that's okay. We can fix that in Photoshop. So we're going to click the open button here. And now it's going to open it in Photoshop. So we have to be patient. So here you have the image. And we're going to use the magic wand tool. So if I hit the W key or select the tool fourth from the top, go down to the magic wand tool, and I'm going to click on the blank areas here. And then I'm going to hold the shift key down and click on the blank area over here. And what it is it's selecting the two blank areas. Now, you'll notice that, especially on this side, you'll see that the marquee is inside, so it's not going to really it's not going to cover all the blank pixels. So we're actually going to take the selection, we're going to modify it. We're going to go to select to modify, and we're going to expand the selection. And I'm going to add 10 pixels to it. And hit OK. So this will allow for a smooth transition for the fill tool. The next thing we're going to do, and there's a lot of different ways to do this, but I'm going to show you this one, is go to fill, and then we're going to pull down to content aware. What that's going to do is it's going to be aware of the content around it, and it's going to try to match it. And then we're going to hit OK. And then we'll deselect it. So like magic, it adds to the photo. So it looks a lot better. So it analyzes the selection, tries to fill it with the right kind of imagery. And it looks like magic. So then go ahead, look at this image, admire it, and then go ahead and close it. So the next one we're going to do is using a guided upright tool to fix lens distortion in poorly composed images. So we're going to open up guided upright 1.dng in Camera Raw plugin. And here you have the outside of the Welcome Center. Poorly composed. And I can say that because I shot the... So the edit panel, go down to basic. We'll go to shift, double click on the whites. Shift, double click on the blacks. And that fixes a lot of it. I'm going to add a little bit to the exposure. So I'll add plus 65. And it looks pretty good right there. So next we'll go down to the optics, open that. And we're going to use the profile corrections, and you'll see that I shot it with a Nikon and all that good stuff. It automatically fixed it, or attempted to fix it. So then we're going to go down one more to the geometry, and we're going to click on this one here, the guided. And what we're going to do is we're going to draw two vertical lines. So I'm going to use two vertical lines to fix this. So I'm going to click on this icon here, and then it'll allow me to draw these vertical lines. So because they have nice lines in the photo, it's a great thing to just kind of match them. And then I'm going to draw another one over here. And look like it's doing a pretty good job. Now I'm going to draw a horizontal line as well. So what that does is then the vertical lines set the vertical lines that you created. It makes them very straight, and then by making that horizontal line, then it makes those meet exactly at a 90 degree. So you can see from before to after, the perspective has changed drastically. It looks so much better. So the next thing we're going to do is go to just manual transformations, and I'm going to add -3 to the horizontal slider. just because I just want it to look a little bit more straight on. Once that's done, we'll just hit open, and it opens it up here in Photoshop. And again, we'll use that the magic wand tool, which is right here. It's on the very bottom of the 4 tool from the top. And I'll click on this side, and I'll click on this side over here. And then I'm going to go to the selection. I'm going to modify and expand it by 10 pixels. Then I'm going to go to under Edit and click on Content Aware Fill. So what that does is then that adds a filter over top, and you can select where you want the content that it's pulling from. So I don't want any of the window here because it doesn't match, and I don't want any of this big brick here. So I'm going to remove that as well. And if I want, I could remove this black piece here. And I could remove this here because I don't want that. I don't want this. And I don't want that. So then it'll use all the areas that are you've highlighted. And then you hit apply. And you can actually see what it's going to look like. And hit OK. So I'm going to deselect. And that looks pretty decent. It's a little bit off right here, but that's not bad at all. So again, look at the image, admire it, and then we're going to save this one as well. So go under File, Save As. I'm going to save it as a copy once it opens, and then I'm going to select JPEG, and I'm going to call it lesson _6 D .jpg. I'm going to save it right back in that folder. And you're done. So I hope you enjoyed this lesson. There are a lot of different cool things about Camera Raw, and we use Camera Raw plugin and we use Photoshop in this lesson. But I hope they hear from you in the discussions. Have a great week.